after this storm, they actually had to add a new level warning to the storm system. So usually people are warned this is a level 1 storm up to level 5. They had to add a level 6. Like I'm sure you know the Spinal Tap
Yeah, turn it
thing.
up to 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had to do that, but unfortunately for storm warnings, because they need people to understand that the storms now are more powerful than anything you've experienced.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Nice
Really honored to be here.
It's a great honor to have you here as well. Congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
What is it about the story? I mean, you've been documenting the lives of typhoon survivors in the Philippines for more than a decade now. What is it about the story that hits home for you?
I mean, it really starts with family. So my mother's from the Philippines. She was born and raised on the island where this film was made. And in 2011, my cousin there, Sheila, lost her home in a different typhoon called Typhoon Haiyan, which unfortunately killed 2,000 people and displaced tens of thousands of folks, including my cousin who lost her home and the land she lived on. And ever since that, and kind of meeting with her and seeing how she was impacted, how her neighbors were impacted, I really started committing to working over there. I'd been working for years in climate change in Canada.
Yeah.
And I was sort of disillusioned when I got there and witnessed what she had experienced, because it really made me wonder how my efforts were helping people who were right on the front lines of climate change.
Right.
And that was a shift for me to want to work more closely with those folks.
Let's just fill everybody in here. So, like, I knew your work way back when. I want to say like 15 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
Your life in Vancouver at the time. Just give us a snapshot of it. I remember you being sort of this prankster.
Yeah.
Who was always interrupting something to do with the Harper government.
Yeah. So I was one of the co-founders of an organization that basically made jokes about and played pranks on the Harper government for 4 years incessantly.
You seem keenly aware that we can't say the name of it on the CBC radio.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I might have even forgotten the name. But yeah, we had this website. It went viral. People seemed to like the jokes, and the organization grew. And yeah, we were just kind of poking fun at people in power who we felt deserved it, who deserved a bit more accountability. And that's what I was doing when this Typhoon Haiyan hit. I was really immersed in that work. And I had to kind of look over there and see what I could do to get involved.
What do you remember about the day you heard that the typhoon hit?
I mean, I think for folks who have family in the Philippines, there's this period around Christmas, which is usually the strongest storm season. So like November, December, where you're kind of on edge. You're watching the news. You're wanting to see if there's a big storm coming. And this was just a storm that changed everything. I mean, there's so many storms in the Philippines, but after this storm, they actually had to add a new level warning to the storm system. So usually people are warned this is a level 1 storm up to level 5. They had to add a level 6. Like I'm sure you know the Spinal Tap.
Yeah, turn it up to 11.
Yeah. So they had to do that, but unfortunately for storm warnings, because they need people to understand that the storms now are more powerful than anything you've experienced.
So you were used to watching the storms. Anyone with family in the Philippines will tell you that you were used to watching the storms around that time of year. You know, used to keeping an eye on it, and then you start to see that, oh my, this is going to be far worse than we could have expected.
Yeah, and I mean, that island that everyone saw in the news for, a week there where the devastation happened, that was where my mom was born and raised. I had been there about 6 months prior. So, yeah, it was very intense to witness it from a distance. And pretty much right away, I just wanted to figure out how I could do something to be involved.
So this is interesting to me. On the 1-year anniversary of the typhoon, a group representing survivors contacted you to make a documentary in the area. And that's sort of how this film we're going to talk about today got started. Why did they ask you and not a local filmmaker?
Yeah, so I knew some of these organizers, and at that time there was a president in power who, during their term, 32 journalists had been assassinated. And then the presidency after that, Rodrigo Duterte, over 30,000 people were killed extrajudicially during his time in power. That's why he's currently in The Hague in prison on trial for crimes against humanity. So it was and continues to be a very difficult country in which to speak out. And these organizers felt that it would be easier for me to document what was happening honestly because of my privilege as a Canadian citizen and someone who's white passing, that, they wanted me to come. And when I went there, they had this huge rally with about 20,000 people. And I was used to documenting, rallies in Vancouver where maybe there'd be 500 people and about 20 of them are filming it, which is great. Yeah. And it's all going on YouTube. But at this rally in the Philippines, there was 20,000 people, and there was me and one other woman filming. And so when I witnessed that, I thought, oh, there really is a reason for me to be here filming.
What does that feel like emotionally? Do you start feeling responsibility? Do you start feeling like, oh my God, this is quite a story to tell, or I'm ready for it? Or
yeah, responsibility. That's a great word. I had a mentor who taught me a very specific meaning of it. I think a lot of people view it as a kind of a burden that you carry.
Something you got to do.
Something you got to do. But what I was taught by a friend of mine, Melina Labacan Masumo, was that responsibility is actually, it's right there in the word. It's your ability to respond to something. And your ability is like whatever your unique skill set is. And so as someone who started doing stand-up when I was a teenager and, went to film school, this is what I got. So I don't know if it's helpful, but I thought I'd start trying.
That's a beautiful way of thinking about it. I never heard that before. The stand-up thing is interesting because you meet the star of this new movie, Jaya, at one of these back and forth trips you're doing to the Philippines. You come across them at a comedy show. Can you tell the story?
Yeah, so it was during that first short documentary I filmed. It's the 1-year anniversary of the storm. Yeah. Tens of thousands of people passed. And it's a very sad time. But as someone who's a comedian, I sort of need to laugh like every day. And so I asked some folks, I almost thought it was inappropriate. I said, is there like a comedy show in town?
Maybe not expecting that there would be one. You know what I mean? Are people really ready to have a,
Exactly. And oddly enough, they said, there's a show down the street tonight on the 1-year anniversary of the storm. You should go see Jaya's show. And so I go to this bar. And I had never met Jaya. And similar to me, Jaya's been doing stand-up in the Philippines for over 20 years. And they come out on stage, and stand-up in the Philippines is different from Canada. Like, there's the jokes and the storytelling, but there's also singing and dancing. And then there's karaoke. So the audience will come on stage and sing songs throughout the show.
Hold on. When I read this, I thought it was a different... No, this is just part of what the stand-up scene is like?
Yeah, that's just kind of what live comedy is in the Philippines.
Occasionally
typically.
people are going to get up and start singing after the comedians. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit more vaudeville and like K-pop. Yeah, there's a bunch of different elements in there.
Gotcha.
So I'm watching this show, and Jaya's hilarious. And every 10 minutes or so, someone comes on stage to sing a karaoke song. And inevitably, they would sing the favorite song of a loved one that they had lost in the storm.
Oh, man.
So they'd start, belting out this 80s classic, and they would just start weeping, and then the whole room would start weeping with them. And it was this huge cathartic moment. And then after that, Jai would come back on stage and start just telling jokes again and getting everyone laughing. And that rhythm continued for over 2 hours. And I had just never seen a live show like this. I was just totally blown away by what Jai was doing. And I told them right there, I said, I want to work with you. I need to, make a film with you. You're so talented, and what you're doing here is so exceptional. And I really think the film grew out of what I witnessed there, because we wanted to do something that was participatory, that allowed the people in the audience, the real survivors, to participate and find joy in the process. And that's how we came to make the film.
So let's pick it up there. So Asog, the film we're talking about today, you made it with Jaya and the other star. You co-wrote it with Jaya and the other star of the movie, Arnel. It's not quite a documentary. It's not a documentary, but it's real people talking about real things that have happened in the places that they happened. However, it's a buddy comedy and like a road trip comedy.
Sarang, buddy? Naku, hindi ako tinutukoy mo. Hindi pa nga kita nakita sa buong buhay ko. Tulungan mo ako.
Tell me a little bit about Jaya and Arnel, and I guess how their real lives show up in this movie. It's a little bit of a balancing act, I know.
Yeah, so Jaya was is still a very well-known comedian in this region of the Philippines. They actually had a chat show, a local chat show, maybe similar to this, smaller, of course.
Better.
And it was a televised chat show, and they had gotten this after 15 years of this career. They were hosting this show, and then this storm, Haiyan, destroyed the studio.
Oh my!
And so when that happened, they had to go back to their previous work as a grade school teacher and kind of give up on this pursuit of fame. So they went back to teaching. And Arnel is a young man who was in my first feature film. I had known him for, I've known him for almost 12 years at this point. And so I knew his family, and he had just lost his mother, who I knew. I had just lost my mother. And we really started writing together, just talking about that experience, what this was like.
Yeah.
And Jaya also had a pretty exceptional mother story. And so we really started trying to write something that would honor our mothers. It's not a film about our mothers, but it attempts to honor them. And yeah, so we wrote it together. It was really outlines of scenes, things they'd experienced. And then we came up with this fictional device to kind of hold all these true stories together, which was this buddy road trip. As an Ontario boy growing up, like one of the most formative experiences I had in the theater was getting to see Dumb and Dumber at about 10 years old.
Yeah.
Literally the only experience I've had rolling in the aisles laughing. And, and there's an Ontario guy on screen and Jim Carrey. And so I really grew up, like a lot of people who grew up in the 90s, on buddy comedies. And that became a device to kind of hold all these experiences together. It allowed us to travel the island and meet people and kind of document their experiences and tie it all in a bow.
But can you break this down for me a little bit more? Like why, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but like why not make a sad movie about an incredibly sad, tragic event? Why not make a documentary about Jaya's real life or Arnel's real life, which is what they've gone through is hard enough. I'll talk about what I loved about the reason that you didn't, but I realized I should probably ask you, did that cross your mind? Were you like, that maybe I should make a bit of a sadder film, or I should make a...
I mean, to be honest, the first documentary I made, this short documentary when they invited me, was very sad.
Yeah.
And I had been filming and I was editing, and then they said, there's this rally happening. 20,000 people are coming, so we need to show them the film. And I said, oh, but I've...
Show them the documentary film.
Yeah, and I said, oh, but I've only been filming for a week, so it's going to take me many months to finish this. And they said, well, all these people are coming. We have to show them something. And so I edited something rough very quickly, and I showed it to the organizers. And they said, it's so sad. And I said, well, yeah, everything's really sad, I think.
It's an incredibly world-altering, sad, tragic event.
Yeah. And they said, well, yes, it's sad, but what the audience needs is to be either inspired or angered. And that was really instructive for me. And I had been taught by a mentor to treat a story like the remains of a loved one. And this was actually a Filipino indigenous protocol around storytelling. And so that means just like a loved one after they pass, it's like, who has the right to speak on their behalf and why? And to always be interrogating that, like, why am I telling this story? And so this really wasn't my story. So when these folks told me, well, it shouldn't be so sad, it should be a bit angrier, a bit more uplifting, I just tried to act on that. And then as I made more films, I just realized that, of course, people just want to have fun, even if they're experiencing these very tragic conditions. And I increasingly found a way in the filmmaking process, and this is now the second feature film being made this way, to essentially learn to improvise and play with these folks to lift the whole process out of the tragedy.
Yeah, you and I were talking about that before we got going, that I said, one of the things I said to you, I said, I feel like the reason it was so effective, even though it's much harder to do, is that I felt like it wasn't, and this might sound maybe a little embarrassed to say this, but it didn't feel like it was just throwing sadness at me. And therefore it allowed to sort of fester in me a little bit more. And even fester, it just allowed to come over me a little bit more. I began to like respond to what was happening through empathy and compassion and not, I don't know, some other more harmful feeling. Like it's really artfully done.
Oh, thank you, Tom. That means a lot. And it was really intuitive. I mean, Jaya was a comedian. If you've seen my stand-up, it's very dry.
Yeah.
Jaya is very loud and boisterous. They're much more kind of Filipino in their style of comedy. And so we had this great balancing of sensibilities. But as we were working, we were always intuitively just feeling things in our bodies. And sometimes we would film a scene and be like, this feels too sad. So let's try to work something else into the scene to lighten it.
I mean, there's something about watching that, knowing that that all of the folks in this film are survivors of the typhoon, that they're all non-actors. Watching them be silly and watching them be funny is, I don't even know if I have a word for it. Like, it's very powerful to watch that in some ways, you know?
Yeah, well, I think the joy is real. I mean, to bring it back to another Ontario boy who influenced me, Mike Myers. I saw this interview with Mike Myers where he's talking about making Wayne's World, which those films were hugely influential on me. And he said he was so nervous about making his first film, and that Dana Carvey calmed him down and said, hey, if we just have fun, it's going to feed through the camera and the audience is going to feel that. And so that's sort of what this process was like, was really just trying to have fun with these folks. I mean, in the scenes where it was supposed to be fun. And that was my favorite part of the process, was when we would arrive at a joke and work it out together. And then as soon as they understood it, it's theirs. And they're just going to start playing with it. Another thing that made the process odd was I don't speak any of these dialects. I don't speak Tagalog. There's 3 different Filipino dialects in this film. I don't speak any of them. So I was working through translators. And basically we would come up with the outline for the scene, but then they're just speaking, really improvising most of the dialect or the dialogue in their own dialect. So there's so much of it that allows them to really take ownership of it and just play with it.
Let's talk about this. So along with the main plot of Asog, the movie, in addition to the buddy comedy, the movie touches on how after the typhoon, a lot of Filipinos were displaced while big corporations redeveloped their communities. That has been very controversial in the Philippines. What's been the response to your movie there?
Yeah, so after this Storm Haiyan in 2013, the Philippines pioneered something that I consider unfortunate, which was they essentially privatized the disaster response. So they brought some of the biggest corporations in the country together and allowed them to choose which parts of the country they would, quote unquote, rehabilitate. And so the Ayala conglomerate, which is the oldest corporation in the Philippines, was founded in colonial times. Their real estate wing is the largest real estate company in the country. And when they got to choose which part they wanted to rehabilitate, they chose this island called Sakugan, which is very close to the island we were filming on. And their idea of rehabilitation was to work with other private partners to force people off their land and out of their homes in the aftermath of the storm to take advantage of the crisis. So over 6,000 people were forced out. Most of them were forced off the island. And 784 families refused to leave, still to this date, and to basically fight for their right to their ancestral lands. And we wanted to bring this story to light because it had been really covered up in the Philippines. And so we contacted the leadership of that community, and there's a cameo, sort of a third act cameo in which this community is brought into the film, and we get to hear their stories directly of how their land was stolen.
Talk to me a little bit about the reaction to the film since it's been made and screened.
Right. So it took about a year before it premiered in the Philippines. We'd gone all over the world to a lot of major festivals with it. And it was invited to a festival in Manila called Cinemalaya, which is a very major festival there. We got reports from people who were trying to buy tickets that the screening wasn't listed on the site. People who went to the cinema were told it was sold out when it definitely wasn't. And then when the movie started, they had actually added a new opening to the film, a sort of disclaimer that said, this film depicts events on this island where our corporation was involved. And we just want you to know that the people on that island are very happy with our presence. The ironic thing was that most of the folks in the audience were the people from that island who we had brought to finally see the film on the big screen at this festival. So they immediately could see that this was a dishonest disclaimer, and it really upset them. And they finally allowed us to name the company and kind of ask people to put pressure on them online after this screening. And so we did that with their permission. We asked Ayala to pay over $500,000 in overdue reparations that were still owed at this point. And they responded within 48 hours to the pressure, maybe to other things. And they paid that money. And to date, over $7 million Canadian has been paid to the community. All of that has happened since the movie went into post-production. We're just happy the film exists to help people keep putting pressure on them.
Just thinking about what you said at the beginning of the conversation, where you were talking a little bit about how you came up, doing sort of artful activism around climate change, and how helpless you felt when you saw the typhoon, and you felt like, I think you were saying in some ways, like, what am I doing this for? I mean, the impact is still happening. We talked about this. You famously crashed a speech by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper to protest climate change policies. You were arrested at another event of his. And you said that moments like that taught you about what's possible, and it continues to motivate you. And that's one of the things that led to this film. Can you tell me more about that?
It shouldn't be possible for two people, my friend and I, to, sneak into this event and get that close to the Prime Minister. We felt it was necessary, and we found a way to do it with the support of a few other friends. And so I feel like through experiences like that, I've just learned that things that seem impossible are possible when we organize. And I think a lot of the films that I've made that we're describing, the nuts and bolts of it is really organizing work, like working with community and building an analysis of power and agreeing on an approach that we think can improve the situation. And so, yeah, that's really the approach we took to this film. Was we wanted to make a film about climate change that didn't leave the audience in despair. We wanted to make a film about climate change that had a happy ending, and a happy ending that actually existed off screen in the real world, and that the happiness of that ending really depended on the audience participating in what they're witnessing. And so things have gotten better in the last few years. There's still a ways to go, and pressure will be required, as I said, for generations. But yeah, we're really happy with the result.
It is sort of an antidote to cynicism, and cynicism that I have felt myself. I mean, my God, I've been doing this show for a long time now, and as I try to live my life in a very uncynical way, and I try to be as hopeful as I possibly can all the time. And sometimes I find myself, even on this show, what do I want to say here? Like, beginning to, honest to God, doubt whether art about these devastating global issues is actually doing anything, or whether like the only hope we have is like very small incremental legislation, and this art is just falling, it's just preaching to the choir, and it's not really making any change. And hearing this story made me, various things throughout my career have made me reconsider it, thankfully. It's kept me in the chair. But it did make me think about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love all forms of art, film. Like, I love things that are purely escapist.
Yeah.
I take joy from everything. I don't think that art should be one thing or the way I make things. But I do think that art is capable of intervening in things, not simply kind of commenting on them from the sidelines. And, that's why in these films I've been so committed to, putting real people on screen and getting our hands dirty, so to speak. And I think when you couple that with working with folks who have strategic thinking and strategic campaigning that they're doing, it's like not every art project needs to reinvent the wheel. You can create things that are in service of very real organizing and campaigning that other folks are doing. And that's really what we did with this film. Like on a metaphor I like is, these big ocean liners, these huge ships that are extremely heavy in the water. They have these giant rudders. And if you try to turn the rudder on a big boat like that, it will be very slow to move. And so there's this rudder on the rudder. It's a second tiny rudder. It's called a trim tab. And this tiny rudder will just support the big rudder by also turning in the same direction. But because of the physics, that actually helps the big one turn faster. And we sort of thought of our film in this way. This community has been trying to fight this impossible fight for over a decade. And can we show up with just a very specific amount of pressure, pushing and supporting their movement, and just trying to accelerate things a bit.
I understand what you mean now when you were talking about the Harper thing, that if small things are possible. If small things that seem impossible are possible, then big things that seem impossible must be possible.
Right. Yeah, especially if we're working in unison or in solidarity, for sure.
You're growing up in Ottawa, both of your parents worked in sustainable development. How does that imprint on you, having two parents who are engaged like that?
It made the dinner table very serious.
Not a lot of jokes,
and
not a lot of puns.
Not a lot of puns. And I was an only child, so it was really just me watching them talk about their work.
Their work is really interesting to me. It was at least your mom, sort of making sure that money spent was money well spent, right?
Yeah. So in Canada, we have CEDA, the Canadian International Development Agency. And, they oversee tax-funded aid projects in other countries, really well-intentioned things. My mom would get hired as an auditor. So after a development project had happened in another country that was funded by Canada, she would be sent to go interview the community to talk about what impact the project had had and how efficient or effective it was. And so, yeah, she was like an auditor of good intentions. And I think that really impacted me. I think if we even just re-listen through this conversation, there's several moments where I was continuously questioning how effective I was, and I guess that's my mom.
You're auditing yourself a little bit there? Yeah, right.
And so, yeah, it was a very serious dinner table where I think I naturally learned to make jokes to kind of break it up and get some attention. But also being an Ottawa boy, it was like Norm Macdonald, my comedy hero. And then at a later stage, it was Tom Green, another Ottawa kid who, people don't believe this when I say it, but I do think Tom Green is very influential in my filmmaking. The pranking and the filming with real people, and the intervention part. So I had my parents on one side, and then Norm Macdonald and Tom Green on TV on the other side, and yeah, I'm here now.
You're your parents filtered through.
Yeah, right.
The guy drinking coffee in the window.
Yeah, yes,
right. You mentioned that your mom passed before this film was finished. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how you felt connected to the survivors of the typhoon because your mom's from that affected area. How do you think? Do you ever think about how she might feel about her community being depicted in this film, being seen in this film?
Yeah, I think she would be really proud. My dad's still around, so I have his perspective to kind of share that she would be really, proud of what the film has accomplished and what the community has accomplished. And yeah, we really made it to honor our mothers, and so I think in a lot of ways we feel like we've succeeded. Yeah.
You mentioned Norm Macdonald. You mentioned Tom Green. Let's do a third Canadian. Let's do Keanu Reeves. There's a great scene in the film where one of your characters says,
Alam mo, may isang nagsabi na ang kalungkutan daw nagpapabago ng kaanyuan, pero hindi natatapos lahat doon. Sino nagsabi? Jesus? Si Keanu Reeves.
And it's a funny line, but it's also so poetic because the person who's saying that, and I'll say it again, grief changes shape, but it never ends, comes from a person who in the real life survived one of the worst natural disasters in history and experienced unimaginable grief. Have you learned anything new? What have you most learned about grief? Spending time with people who've lost everything.
It's so many different things. I think part of our interest in the film was not to make a movie where grief was depicted as sort of a single note, as you alluded to earlier, like a kind of sad, heavy experience.
Yeah.
We talked about when we had lost our moms that afterwards, certainly we cried. There was anger.
Yeah.
There was regret, but there was also things that were just really absurd and made you laugh hysterically.
Very funny, extremely funny. I'm with you. Yeah.
And horrific things, like things that really scared you, that made you think maybe you were hallucinating.
Yeah.
And so there was just so many different textures to it. And we just wanted to try to honor all of them. There's a bit of David Lynch in the film, speaking of folks we've lost. And I really admire in his work how he was always committed to a vision he had, that he didn't necessarily need to know what it meant. He just wanted to render it on the screen as accurately as possible.
Yeah.
And we took a bit of that approach with grief in the film of, this is something that happened that I felt afterwards, and we're going to include it. I don't know how it necessarily relates or what it means, but hopefully it speaks to other folks who have experienced something similar.
What do you, I find myself often asking either like, what do you hope the audience takes from your film at the end of these things? Or I ask like, when people are on their way back to the car, what do you hope, if people are seeing the film and they're on the way back to the car, what do you hope they're talking about? Yours is interesting because the people affected are also in the film. What do you hope the actors in this film, the people who really went through, the actors in this film, may have taken away from the experience of making it?
I mean, pride is one of the very first things. A lot of films that are made in the Philippines, or just scenes in films that are in the Philippines, they'll throw that sepia filter on there, and everything gets really shaky because things are supposed to be kind of scary and dangerous there. Even though these communities are still devastated by these storms, and you can see it, it's still where they live, and folks take great pride in it. And so we really worked closely with our cinematographer, incredibly talented woman, Anna McDonald, to try to render the landscapes with dignity so that folks could feel proud of how their community was being depicted and proud of how they look on screen. And one of the greatest proofs of that has been over the years that as I've made these films, unfortunately, some people have passed away who have been in them. And the families will consistently reach out for stills from the film to be their funeral picture of their loved one, because they feel that's the most beautiful image they have of this person they've lost. And so, that basic kind of pride in self, pride in community, I think
and dignity and all that. Yeah.
And in terms of the audience, I think, I hope they laugh. I hope they know that they will laugh if they go into it, that they leave aware of what's happening there and come to our website and get involved. But also that there is a healing power, at least for some in the film. I've heard people say that things like after they watched the film, they went home after having lost a parent. They watched the movie, they went home, and, they said they lied in bed and felt like their heart grew for an hour as they processed the loss. So, I mean, it's not going to be that for everyone, but if folks are experiencing loss, I do think this film is for you. If you want to just laugh, I think it's for you. I think it's for a lot of different folks.
I think it's a great film, Seán.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
I think it's a very, honest to God, I think it's a very hard film you made, a very artful, a lot of things to dance around and a lot of decisions to make that weren't the easy decisions, and it really paid off. It's a really beautiful film.
Oh, thank you, Tom.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.